The phone went straight to voicemail. Again. Jake Mitchell stared at the screen of his cell phone, watching his daughter's name disappear as the automated message kicked in for the 12th time that week. Sarah's voice, recorded years ago when she still answered his calls, chirped brightly. "Hey, it's Sarah. Leave a message and I'll call you back." She never called back. Jake sat on the edge of his motel bed in Flagstaff, Arizona, the phone heavy in his weathered hand. Outside, the sun was climbing toward noon, painting the desert landscape in shades of copper and gold. Inside, the air conditioner rattled and wheezed, fighting a losing battle against the June heat. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Jake said after the beep, his voice rough with road dust and regret. 23 years old today. I know you probably won't listen to this, but I wanted you to know I'm thinking about you. I'm always thinking about you. I love you, Sarah. I hope you're happy. He ended the call and sat there staring at the photo he'd set as her contact picture. Sarah, at 8 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, sitting on his shoulders at a county fair. The last good memory before everything fell apart. Before Iraq. Before the nightmares. Before the divorce and the custody battle he'd lost because the judge took one look at his PTSD diagnosis and decided he wasn't fit to raise a child. 15 years ago. Might as well be a lifetime. A knock on the adjoining door pulled him from his thoughts. "You ready to ride, old man, burning daylight?" Marcus Webb stood in the doorway between their rooms, already dressed in his leather vest, his dark skin gleaming with the sheen of sunscreen. At 43, Marcus was a decade younger than Jake, but the road had aged them both in ways that had nothing to do with years. "She didn't answer," Jake said, not looking up. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he stepped into the room and sat down in the chair by the window. "Jake, brother, you've been calling that girl every week for 5 years. She hasn't picked up once. Maybe it's time to—" "To what?" Jake's voice came out sharper than he intended. "Give up. Accept that I failed as a father and just move on." "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying, Marcus?" Marcus rubbed his face, choosing his words carefully. "I'm saying some things, once they're broken, they don't get fixed. You can't force healing. You can't make someone forgive you just because you want it bad enough." Jake finally looked at his friend. Marcus knew about broken things. His own daughter, Keisha, was 20 now, living with her grandmother in Texas. Marcus saw her maybe twice a year, always awkward visits full of silence and things left unsaid. His ex-wife had made sure of that, citing his temper, his drinking, the night the cops had to be called when his PTSD flashbacks got too intense. They were both men who'd left pieces of themselves in desert sand halfway across the world. And when they came home, they found they didn't fit anymore. Not in their marriages, not in their families, not anywhere except on the open road with the wind in their faces and the rumble of their motorcycles drowning out the memories. "I know I can't force it," Jake said quietly, "but I can't stop trying either. She's my daughter, Marcus. She's all I have. You have me, brother, and you have the road. That's something." Jake nodded, shoving the phone into his pocket. Yeah, you're right. Let's ride." They'd been riding together for 15 years, ever since they'd met at a veterans support group in Phoenix. Both of them had been court-ordered to attend after separate incidents that had convinced judges they needed help. The group hadn't done much good. Sitting in a circle talking about feelings didn't erase the sound of IEDs or the faces of the dead, but it had given them each other. Two broken men who understood that some wounds don't heal, they just scar over. Their motorcycles sat side by side in the motel parking lot, chrome glinting in the harsh sunlight. Jake's Harley-Davidson was a 2003 Road King, black as midnight, with custom pipes that announced his presence long before he arrived. Marcus rode a 2008 Softail, deep blue with silver accents covered in patches from motorcycle clubs across 3 states. Neither of them belonged to a club anymore. Too many rules, too much structure reminded them of the military, but they wore the patches like battle ribbons, proof they'd survived another year on the road. Jake swung his leg over his bike and felt the familiar settle of weight and balance. This machine he understood. This made sense in a way the rest of his life never had. Marcus pulled on his riding gloves, squinting at the cloudless sky. "Route 66 west to Williams, that's south toward Prescott." "Sounds good. Maybe stop at that diner in Williams for an early dinner. The one with the good meatloaf." "Rosie's place." "That's the one." They started their engines in unison, the deep rumble echoing off the motel's adobe walls. A mother pulling luggage from a minivan grabbed her young son's hand and pulled him closer, watching the two leather-clad bikers with wary eyes. Jake saw it and felt the familiar sting. To her, they were dangerous, scary, the kind of men you cross the street to avoid. She had no idea they were more afraid of themselves than she could ever be of them. The ride from Flagstaff to Williams took them through some of the most beautiful country in northern Arizona. Ponderosa pines gave way to high desert scrubland, then back to forest as elevation shifted. The historic Route 66 wound alongside Interstate 40, sometimes merging with it, sometimes branching off into forgotten sections of the old highway, where vintage motels and gas stations stood like monuments to a different era. Jake loved this stretch of road. Out here with the wind and the engine and the endless horizon, his mind could quiet. The voices that usually whispered in the dark, the ones that told him he was worthless, that he'd failed everyone who ever counted on him, that Sarah was right not to answer his calls, those voices couldn't compete with 90 miles an hour and open sky. They rode for 2 hours, stopping once at a scenic overlook where tourists snapped photos of the vast landscape. An older couple smiled and waved, asking if they could take a picture with the real bikers. Jake and Marcus obliged, standing stiff and awkward, while the woman's husband positioned them just right. They were props in someone else's vacation story. The Wild West experience. By the time they rolled into Williams, the sun was starting its descent toward the horizon, painting everything in shades of burnt orange and deep purple. The town was small, maybe 3,000 people clinging to its Route 66 heritage, with vintage signs and old-fashioned storefronts. Train tracks ran through the center of town, carrying tourists to the Grand Canyon on restored locomotives. Rosie's Diner sat just off the main drag, a time capsule from the 1950s, with pink stucco walls and a neon sign shaped like a coffee cup. The parking lot was gravel dotted with a handful of pickup trucks and sedans. Jake and Marcus pulled in, killed their engines, and sat for a moment in the sudden silence, letting their bodies adjust to stillness after hours of vibration and motion. "My back's killing me," Jake muttered, climbing off his bike with a groan. Marcus grinned. "That's what happens when you refuse to admit you're not 25 anymore. You're one to talk. I heard your knees crack from here." Inside the diner was exactly as Jake remembered. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floor, a jukebox in the corner playing Patsy Cline. A handful of truckers occupied the counter, nursing coffee and pie. Behind the counter, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and tired feet looked up from wiping down a booth. "Sit anywhere, gentlemen," she called out, her voice carrying the warm rasp of someone who'd worked the late shift for too many years. Jake chose a booth near the window where they could keep an eye on their bikes, old habits. They hadn't had trouble in years, but you couldn't shut off the instincts that kept you alive in combat. Always know your exits. Always watch your six. Always be ready. The waitress appeared with menus and glasses of water. Her name tag read Dorothy. "What'll it be, boys?" "Coffee black," Jake said. "And whatever your special is." "Make that 2, Marcus added. As Dorothy walked away, Jake noticed her for the first time. A little girl no more than 8 or 9 years old sitting alone in a booth near the back. She had dark hair pulled into a ponytail and wore clothes that looked worn but clean, a faded purple t-shirt and jeans with patches on the knees. What caught his attention wasn't just that she was alone, but the way she kept glancing toward the door, her small hands wrapped around something in her lap. Every few minutes, her eyes would dart toward them, watching, waiting for something. "You see that kid?" Jake asked quietly. Marcus turned slightly in his seat. "Yeah, been sitting there since we walked in, no parent in sight." "Strange." Their food arrived quickly. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, standard diner fare, but after 8 hours on the road, it tasted like heaven. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of friendship where you don't need to fill every moment with words. But Jake couldn't shake the image of that little girl. Something about her was off. The way she sat so still, so tense. The way she kept checking the door like she was expecting someone who never came. Every few minutes, her gaze would drift back to their booth, and Jake could see something in her eyes. Not fear exactly, more like calculation. Like she was trying to decide something. "She's staring at us," Marcus said, keeping his voice low. "I know." Before Marcus could respond, the girl slid out of her booth and started walking toward them. Up close, Jake could see the worry etched into her young face, the way her eyes were red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying. She stopped at the edge of their table, one small hand gripping a crumpled $10 bill. "Excuse me," she said, her words soft and trembling. Are you nice people?" Jake and Marcus exchanged a glance. In their leather vests and faded denim with their weathered faces and arms covered in tattoos, they knew exactly how they looked. Jake had seen mothers pull their children closer when he walked by. Marcus had been asked to leave establishments that assumed he was trouble before he even opened his mouth. Nice people. When was the last time anyone had asked them that? "We try to be, sweetheart," Marcus said gently, his voice losing its rough edge. "You okay?" The girl's lower lip trembled. She held out the $10 bill with both hands like an offering. "This is all I have," she said, tears beginning to spill down her cheeks. "But I need help. My mama, she didn't come home last night. She always comes home." Jake felt something tighten around his ribs, a pressure he hadn't felt in years. He set down his fork carefully, his full attention on this child who was looking at them with such desperate hope. "Where's your dad, honey?" he asked. "Don't have one. It's just me and Mama." The tears were flowing freely now. "She works at the hospital in Flagstaff. She's a nurse. She left for work yesterday morning, and she always calls me when her shift ends, but she didn't call, and she didn't come home. And Mrs. Peterson next door, she let me stay over, but she had to go to work this morning, and I walked here because I didn't know what else to do, and—" The words tumbled out in a rush, faster and faster, until she was sobbing. Marcus was out of the booth in an instant, kneeling down to her level. Jake followed his large frame, folding awkwardly as he crouched beside his friend. Hey, it's okay," Marcus said softly. "What's your name?" "Emma," she hiccuped. Emma Bennett." "Emma, I'm Marcus, and this is Jake. And you know what? You did exactly the right thing asking for help." Marcus glanced at the bill, trembling in her grip. "But you keep your money, okay? We don't need it." "But I don't have anything else to give you," Emma said, confused. Jake felt something shift in his chest, like tectonic plates moving deep underground. This little girl, scared alone, offering strangers her last $10 because she had nowhere else to turn, reminded him of why he joined the military in the first place. That desire to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. The same desire that had driven him to be a father, even if he'd failed spectacularly at it. She reminded him of Sarah at that age. The same fierce determination in her eyes, even through the tears. The memory hit him hard. Sarah at 8 in that courtroom, her hand in the judge's grip. The day she'd said in a small voice, "I don't want to live with Daddy. He scares me when he has bad dreams." Jake had stood there in his dress uniform, medals on his chest, watching his daughter choose her mother because he'd become a stranger to her. A scary stranger who woke up screaming and couldn't hold down a bomb and drank too much to drown the memories. "Emma," Jake said, his voice gruff but gentle. "What's your mama's name?" Sophia Bennett. She's 34 and she has long brown hair and she drives a blue Honda Civic, and she would never just not come home without telling me. Never." Emma's voice rose with panic. "Something's wrong. I know something's wrong." Marcus stood up and looked at Jake. In that single glance, they had an entire conversation. Years of riding together, of watching each other's backs, of shared experiences that had forged their friendship in steel, it all communicated in one look. This wasn't their problem. They could give the kid $20, call the cops, and it's right away. That would be the smart thing to do, the safe thing. But neither of them had ever been good at smart or safe. "Emma," Marcus said, "we're going to help you find your mama, and we're not going to take your money. Deal?" Emma's eyes widened. "Really? You promise?" "We promise," Jake said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "But first we need to call some people. Did you call the police?" "I tried." Emma's voice broke. "I called 911 this morning, but they said since she's an adult and it hasn't been 24 hours, they can't do anything yet. They said she probably just went somewhere and forgot to call. But my mama would never do that. Never." Jake's jaw clenched. He understood the protocols, but he also understood that sometimes protocols meant people fell through the cracks. 24 hours could mean the difference between finding someone and losing them forever. Dorothy, the waitress, approached cautiously. "Everything all right here?" Ma'am, Marcus said, do you know this little girl? Emma, sure. She comes in sometimes with her mother. Sophia's a sweetheart, works herself to the bone at that hospital. The waitress's expression shifted to concern. Emma, honey, where's your mama? That's what we're trying to figure out, Jake said, standing up. His knees protested. She didn't come home from work yesterday. Dorothy pressed her hand to her chest. Oh, Lord, Sophia would never. That woman lives for her daughter. That's what Emma said. Jake pulled out his phone. I'm going to make some calls. Marcus, stay with Emma. As Jake stepped outside into the warm evening air, he scrolled through his contacts until he found a name he hadn't called in months. Danny Crawford. Old Army buddy, 2 tours in Iraq together now, a sheriff's deputy in Coconino County. If anyone could cut through red tape and actually start looking for Sophia Bennett, it was Danny. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Jake Mitchell, either you're in trouble or you need a favor. Both, maybe, Jake said. Danny, I need your help with something. Inside the diner, Marcus sat down across from Emma, pushing his half-eaten meatloaf aside. The girl watched him with wide, frightened eyes, the money still clutched in her small hands. Emma, I need you to tell me everything you can remember about yesterday morning. What time did your mama leave for work? What was she wearing? Did she seem worried about anything? Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and took a shaky breath. She left at 6:30 in the morning like always. She had her blue scrubs on, the ones with the little flowers on the pocket. She made me promise to do my homework and eat the casserole in the fridge for dinner. Emma's voice kicked again. She kissed me goodbye and said she'd see me before bed. But she never came home. Marcus pulled out a small notebook from his vest pocket, a habit from his military days, and started writing. What about her car? The blue Honda you mentioned. It's a 2012. There's a bumper sticker on the back that says Nurse's Care, and there's a little scratch on the driver's side from when she hit a pole in the hospital parking garage last year. Emma smiled faintly at the memory, then her face crumpled again. She was so embarrassed about that scratch. That's good, Emma. Those details help. Marcus made a note. Do you know what route she takes to work? She takes Route 66 to I-40 East, then up to Flagstaff. She says it's longer than going straight to the interstate, but she likes seeing the old highway. She says it reminds her of when things were simpler. Emma looked down at the money still in her hand. This is from my piggy bank. I've been saving it for a new bike, but finding Mama is more important than a bike. Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. He'd seen a lot in his life. Combat, loss, people at their worst and their best. But this little girl's willingness to give up everything she had, trusting 2 strangers who probably scared her half to death, that was something else entirely. It reminded him of Keisha at that age, the way she used to look at him like he could fix anything, solve any problem. Before Afghanistan changed him, before he came home angry and broken and drove everyone away. He remembered the last time he'd seen Keisha before the divorce was finalized. She was 8 years old, standing in her grandmother's doorway, refusing to hug him goodbye. You're different now, Daddy, she'd said. You're not fun anymore. You're just scary. Jake came back inside, his expression grim but determined. I talked to Danny Crawford. He's a deputy with Coconino County Sheriff. He's going to start making calls, checking hospitals and accident reports. But Emma, we need to go to your house. We need to look at anything your mama might have left behind. Notes, messages, anything that might tell us where she is. Emma nodded eagerly, sliding out of the booth. Our house is just 3 blocks from here. We can walk. We'll take the bikes, Marcus said. It'll be faster. Emma's eyes widened with a mixture of fear and excitement. I've never been on a motorcycle before. First time for everything, Jake said with a slight smile. Don't worry, we'll go slow. As they walked out into the parking lot, the last rays of sunlight were fading behind the mountains. The temperature was dropping and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage and distant rain. Jake pulled out a spare helmet from his saddlebag. He always carried an extra, a habit from when Sarah was young before the divorce, before he'd lost custody, before everything fell apart. He shook off the memory and helped Emma with the helmet, making sure it was secure. You're going to sit behind me and hold on tight, okay? And if you get scared, you just tap my shoulder and I'll stop. Emma nodded, her small face almost disappearing inside the oversized helmet. Marcus watched as Jake carefully lifted Emma onto the back of his bike. There was a gentleness to his friend's movements that Marcus rarely saw a crack in the armor that Jake usually kept firmly in place. Jake started his engine, the rumble echoing across the parking lot. Emma's small arms wrapped around his waist, holding on for dear life. Marcus fell in beside them on his own bike, and together they pulled out onto Route 66, the historic highway stretching before them in the gathering dusk. As they rode through the quiet streets of Williams, past the old motels and gas stations, past the railroad tracks and vintage signs, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something significant. They'd ridden these roads for years, looking for freedom, looking for peace, looking for purpose. Maybe, just maybe, in helping this little girl find her mother, they'd finally found all three. The question was, what had happened to Sophia Bennett? And would they find her in time? Emma's house was a small, single-story ranch with faded blue paint and a chain-link fence surrounding a modest yard. A garden gnome stood guard next to the mailbox, and wind chimes hung from the porch, tinkling softly in the evening breeze. It was the kind of house that spoke of tight budgets and careful choices, but also of love and effort. The grass was neatly mowed, and flower pots lined the steps, even if some of the flowers had wilted from lack of watering. Jake cut his engine, and the sudden silence felt heavy. Emma scrambled off the back of the bike, pulling off the helmet with both hands. Her hair was staticky and wild, but there was a spark of hope in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "That was actually kind of fun," she admitted, quietly handing the helmet back to Jake. "First time's always memorable," Jake said, securing the helmet. "Which house is yours, Emma?" "This one." She pointed to the house directly in front of them, then gestured to the left. "And that's Mrs. Peterson's house. She's nice, but she works at the truck stop on the interstate, so she had to leave this morning." Marcus surveyed the neighborhood. It was quiet, working class, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors but minded their own business. A few houses down, an older man was watering his lawn. Across the street, a teenager was shooting hoops in a driveway. Normal everyday life while Emma's world was falling apart. "Do you have a key?" Marcus asked. Emma reached under a flower pot next to the door and pulled out a spare key. "Mom always keeps one here. She says it's not very safe, but she's afraid I'll lose my own key and get locked out." Inside, the house was small but immaculately kept. The living room held a worn couch covered with a colorful blanket, a coffee table with medical journals stacked neatly on one corner, and a small TV. Photographs covered every available surface. Emma at various ages, school pictures with gap-toothed smiles, photos of Emma and Sophia together, laughing, hugging, living. A small cross hung on the wall next to a calendar marked with Sophia's work shifts in neat handwriting. "It's just us," Emma said, as if reading their thoughts. "It's always been just us." Jake moved to the calendar, studying the markings. Sophia's last shift was circled 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at Flagstaff Medical Center. There was no indication of any plans afterward, no appointments, no notes about meeting anyone. "Emma, where's your mama's room?" Marcus asked. "This way." Emma led them down a short hallway. There were 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Emma's room was clearly the larger of the two, decorated with posters of horses and a bookshelf crammed with well-worn paperbacks. Sophia's room was smaller, with barely enough space for a double bed, a small dresser, and a closet. "Your mama gave you the bigger room," Marcus observed. "She said I needed space to grow," Emma replied softly. "She always does stuff like that. Gives me the bigger piece of chicken. Wakes up early to make my favorite pancakes even when she worked late the night before. That's how I know something's wrong. She'd never just not come home." Jake opened the closet carefully, feeling like an intruder. Inside, he found scrubs in various colors, a few pairs of jeans, some blouses, and a single black dress. On the top shelf was a small lockbox. "Emma, do you know what's in that box?" Jake pointed. "That's where Mama keeps important papers, birth certificates and stuff. She told me if there was ever an emergency, I should get that box. Do you know if there's a key?" Emma thought for a moment, then went to the dresser. She opened the top drawer, socks and undergarments neatly folded, and felt around the back. Her small hand emerged with a tiny key. Jake took the box down and opened it carefully. Inside were the documents Emma had mentioned: her birth certificate, Sophia's nursing license, a small savings passbook showing a balance of $2,847, and a worn photograph of a young Sophia holding infant Emma. But there was something else. A smaller envelope marked emergency contacts. Inside the envelope were 3 phone numbers with names Maria's sister, Father Miguel Church, and Diane Peterson neighbor. There was also a handwritten note. Jake read it aloud. If something happens to me, take Emma to my sister Maria in Phoenix. Tell her I'm sorry I waited so long to call. Tell her I love her. Oh, Emma's voice broke. Why would Mama write that? People write things like this just to be prepared, Marcus said quickly, though his mind was racing. It doesn't mean anything bad is going to happen. It's just being responsible. But Jake caught Marcus's eye and they both knew the truth. Single mothers, especially those without extensive support networks, often lived with the quiet fear that something could happen to them, leaving their children alone. It was preparation born of love, not premonition. Still, it raised questions. We should call the sister, Jake said, and this Father Miguel. They might know if Sophia mentioned anything unusual recently. Emma's phone, an old model with a cracked screen, suddenly buzzed from her pocket. She pulled it out, her face lighting up with desperate hope. Maybe it's Mama. But her expression fell as she looked at the screen. It's just Mrs. Peterson checking on me. Let me talk to her, Jake said gently. Emma handed him the phone and he stepped into the hallway. Mrs. Peterson, this is Jake Mitchell. I'm here with Emma. My friend and I are helping her look for her mother. There was a pause on the other end, then a cautious female voice. Who are you? How do I know Emma's safe? That's a fair question. Hold on. Jake walked back into the living room where Emma stood with Marcus. Emma, can you tell Mrs. Peterson that you're okay? Emma took the phone. Mrs. Peterson. Yes, I'm okay. These men are helping me find Mama. They're bikers, but they're nice bikers. Yes, ma'am. Okay. She handed the phone back to Jake. Mr. Mitchell? Mrs. Peterson's voice was firm now. Emma's like a granddaughter to me. If anything happens to that child, nothing's going to happen to her, ma'am. I give you my word. But I need to ask, did you see or hear anything unusual yesterday? Did Sophia mention anything to you? No, nothing. Sophia left for work at her usual time. I saw her car drive past. She waved at me. I was getting my paper. That was around 6:30 in the morning. Mrs. Peterson sighed. I told Emma to call the police, but they said it was too early to file a report. 24 hours. Like Sophia would just disappear and not tell her daughter. We're working on it. I have a friend in law enforcement making calls. But if you think of anything at all, here's my number. Jake recited his cell phone number. After hanging up, Jake turned to Marcus. Let's call the sister. Marcus dialed the number from the emergency contact list. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. A woman's voice, tired but warm. You've reached Maria Bennett. Leave a message. Ms. Bennett, my name is Marcus Webb. I'm calling about your sister Sophia. She hasn't come home and her daughter Emma is very worried. Please call me back as soon as possible at this number. He left his cell and hung up. Worth a try. What about Father Miguel? Emma asked hopefully. Jake checked his watch, 8:47 p.m. Churches usually have evening hours. Let's try. Someone answered on the 3rd ring. St. Mary's Catholic Church, Father Miguel speaking. Father, my name is Jake Mitchell. I'm calling about one of your parishioners, Sophia Bennett. When was the last time you saw her? Sophia, she was at Mass on Sunday as always. She and Emma sit in the 3rd pew. Why is something wrong? The priest's voice shifted to concern. She didn't come home from work yesterday. Emma's been alone since then. We're trying to find her. There was a sharp intake of breath. Dear God, Sophia would never leave Emma alone, never. That woman lives and breathes for her daughter. A pause. Have you called the hospital? Her supervisor. That's next on our list. But Father, did Sophia seem troubled about anything recently? Did she mention any problems at work or anywhere else? Nothing specific, but... Father Miguel hesitated. Sophia came to confession about 3 weeks ago. I can't share what was said. The seal of confession is absolute, but I can tell you that she was frightened of something. Not for herself, but for Emma. She wanted to know if I knew of any legal resources, anyone who could help, if these were her words, if they came after her. Jake's pulse quickened. Who is they? She wouldn't say, and I didn't press, but she was genuinely scared, Mr. Mitchell. I offered to help, but she said she just needed to keep her head down and it would blow over. The priest's voice grew heavy with regret. I should have pushed harder. I should have insisted she tell me what was wrong. Father, you couldn't have known, but we need to find her now. If you think of anything else, any detail, no matter how small, please call me. Jake gave his number and ended the call. Emma had been standing close enough to hear everything. Her face had gone pale. Mama was scared, she whispered. Of what? We don't know yet, sweetheart, Marcus said, but we're going to find out. Jake's phone buzzed. A text from Danny Crawford. Checked all hospitals and ERs in Coconino and Yavapai counties. No Jane Does matching Sophia's description. No accidents reported on her route. Still checking. It was good news and bad news. Good that Sophia wasn't in a hospital or morgue. Bad because it meant she'd simply vanished. We need to call the hospital where she works, Jake said. Get the number of her supervisor. Emma, did you know who your mom's boss is? Miss Charlotte, Charlotte something. I don't remember her last name, but Mama talks about her a lot. She says Miss Charlotte is tough but fair. Jake found the main number for Flagstaff Medical Center online and called. After navigating through the phone tree, he reached the nursing administration office. It was late, but someone answered, a tired-sounding woman. This is Amanda in nursing admin. How can I help you? I need to speak with the supervisor for Sophia Bennett. She's a nurse in your... Jake realized he didn't know which department. Emergency department, Emma whispered. Emergency department, Jake repeated. That would be Charlotte Brennan, but she's off duty right now. Can I take a message? This is urgent. Sophia Bennett didn't come home from her shift yesterday. Her daughter hasn't heard from her. We're trying to locate her. There was a long pause. Hold on, let me check something. The sound of typing. Sophia was scheduled 7 to 7 yesterday. According to our system, she clocked out at 7:14 p.m. Her time card shows she left the building at 7:22 p.m. Is there security footage, parking lot cameras? I don't have access to that. You'd need to talk to hospital security or the police. But sir, if Sophia's missing, you really need to. We're working on it. Can you give me Charlotte Brennan's cell phone number? This is an emergency involving a child. I can't give out personal numbers, but I can call Charlotte and have her call you. What's your number? Jake provided it, then added, please stress that this is urgent. A little girl is alone and terrified. After hanging up, Jake looked at Emma and Marcus. She clocked out at 7:14 p.m. That means she was alive and at the hospital at that time. It's about an hour drive from Flagstaff to here. She should have been home by 8:30, 8:45 at the latest. So something happened between the hospital and here, Marcus said, on the drive home. Or in the parking lot before she left, Jake countered. We need to see that security footage. Emma tugged on Jake's vest. What if Mama crashed somewhere between here and Flagstaff? What if she's hurt and alone and can't call for help? It was a possibility they'd all been thickening, but no one had said out loud. Route 66 and I-40 had plenty of stretches where a car could go off the road and not be immediately visible, especially at night. Danny's checking accident reports, Jake assured her. But you know what? It wouldn't hurt for us to drive that route ourselves. Look for anything unusual. Marcus checked his watch. It's dark now, but we've got headlights, and 2 sets of eyes are better than none. 3 sets, Emma said firmly. I'm coming with you. Emma, Marcus started. She's my mama. I'm coming. Emma's jaw was set in a way that reminded Jake of every stubborn soldier he'd ever served with. This little girl wasn't going to be left behind. Jake and Marcus exchanged a glance. Taking a child on a potentially dangerous search at night wasn't ideal, but leaving her alone was worse. And maybe, just maybe, Emma would spot something they'd miss. Her mother's car, a familiar landmark, something. All right, Jake said. But you ride with me, and if I tell you to stay on the bike, you stay on the bike. Understood? Yes, sir, Emma said, nodding vigorously. Jake's phone rang. The caller ID showed Charlotte Brennan. This is Jake Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell, this is Charlotte Brennan, emergency department nursing supervisor at Flagstaff Medical. Her voice was brisk but concerned. Amanda said Sophia Bennett didn't come home. That's not like her at all. Sophia is the most reliable person on my staff. Ms. Brennan, I need to know if Sophia seemed upset or worried yesterday. Did anything unusual happen during her shift? Nothing out of the ordinary. It was a typical Monday, busy but manageable. Sophia worked her regular shift. She was actually in a good mood. She told me Emma had gotten an A on her math test, and she was planning to make Emma's favorite dinner to celebrate. Charlotte's voice wavered. She was fine when she left. I saw her walking to her car. She waved goodbye. What time was that? Around 7:20. The parking lot was still fairly full. Shift change time. Were there any incidents with patients or visitors? Anyone who might have followed her, Charlotte paused. Nothing comes to mind, but Mr. Mitchell, the ER, sees hundreds of people. If someone fixated on Sophia for some reason, she trailed off. God, I hope that's not what happened. We're going to drive the route from Flagstaff to Williams. Look for her car. But if you think of anything, anyone who seemed too interested in Sophia, any threats, anything, please call me immediately. I will. And Mr. Mitchell, please find her. Sophia's one of the good ones, and that little girl means everything to her. After hanging up, Jake looked at Emma and Marcus. Let's ride. They went back outside. The night air was now cool and crisp. Stars were beginning to emerge in the vast Arizona sky, a blanket of light in the darkness. Jake helped Emma into the helmet again, and she climbed onto the back of his bike with more confidence this time. As they pulled out onto Route 66 heading east toward Flagstaff, Jake felt the weight of what they'd taken on. Somewhere out there, Sophia Bennett was missing, and with every passing hour, the odds of finding her safe decreased. But they'd made a promise to a little girl who'd offered them her last $10. And Jake Mitchell, for all his faults and failures, was a man who kept his promises. The road stretched ahead of them, dark and uncertain, and they rode into the night searching for answers in the shadows. The ride from Williams to Flagstaff took them through some of the most desolate stretches of northern Arizona. Route 66 paralleled 40 for much of the journey, sometimes merging with it, sometimes branching off into forgotten sections of the old highway, where abandoned gas stations and faded billboards stood like gravestones marking the death of the American road trip. Jake kept his speed moderate, his eyes scanning both sides of the road. Behind him, Emma held on with fierce determination, and he could feel her body tense every time they passed an abandoned building or dark turnoff. Marcus rode alongside them, his headlight cutting through the darkness like a searchlight. They'd agreed before leaving check both Route 66 and I-40 looking for any sign of Sophia's blue Honda Civic. Tire tracks leading off the road. Debris, anything that might indicate an accident or struggle. The highway was sparsely traveled at this hour. Occasionally a semi-truck would roar past them on I-40, its running lights like a constellation moving through the night. The desert on either side was vast and empty, dotted with scrub brush and rock formations that cast strange shadows in the moonlight. They'd been riding for about 20 minutes when Emma tapped Jake's shoulder, the signal they'd agreed on if she needed him to stop. Jake immediately pulled over onto the shoulder, Marcus following suit. He killed the engine and helped Emma off the bike. "What is it, sweetheart?" Emma pointed to a spot about 50 yards ahead, where an old, unmarked dirt road branched off from the highway. "Mom and I came out here once for a picnic. It's a shortcut to Flagstaff. She said during the day when there's traffic, sometimes she takes it to avoid the interstate. It's faster if you know where you're going." Marcus walked over to the turnoff, pulling out his phone and using the flashlight to examine the ground. The dirt was hard-packed, but there were recent tire tracks. Multiple vehicles had used this road, but in Arizona that didn't mean much. Dirt roads like this were common, used by everyone from locals to off-road enthusiasts. "Emma, would your mom take this road at night?" Marcus asked. "I don't think so. She always said the old roads weren't safe after dark. No lights, lots of rocks." Emma's voice was small. "But what if she did? What if she was in a hurry to get home to me?" Jake knelt down beside Emma. "We'll check it out, but it's going to be rough terrain for the bikes. Marcus and I will go slowly." "Okay." They remounted and turned onto the dirt road. Immediately, the ride became rougher. The road was rutted and uneven, forcing Jake to slow to a crawl. His headlight bounced crazily as they navigated around potholes and loose rocks. Emma held on tighter, and Jake could feel her fear. The road wound through a small canyon flanked by rock walls on either side. It was the kind of place that felt isolated even in daylight. At night, it was almost claustrophobic. The bike's engine echoed off the canyon walls, the sound bouncing back at them. They'd gone about 2 miles when Marcus suddenly raised his hand, a signal to stop. Jake pulled up beside him and they both cut their engines. In the sudden silence, Emma's breathing sounded loud. "What is it?" Jake asked. Marcus pointed ahead. In the beam of their headlights, something glinted. Metal reflecting light. Jake's pulse quickened. He helped Emma off the bike again, then walked forward with Marcus, both of them pulling out flashlights from their vests. As they got closer, Jake's heart sank. It was a car, but not a blue Honda Civic. It was an old pickup truck, probably abandoned years ago based on the rust and the way desert vegetation had begun to grow around it. Another dead end. "It's not her," Emma said, her voice breaking. A sob escaped her throat, and Jake turned to see tears falling freely. "Where is she? Where's my mama?" Marcus knelt down and pulled Emma into a hug. The child collapsed against him, her small body shaking with sobs. "We're going to find her," Marcus said quietly. "I promise you, Emma, we're not giving up." Jake turned away, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. He'd failed his own daughter, lost her to a bitter divorce, to distance, to his own inability to be the father she needed. But he wasn't going to fail Emma. Not this time. His phone buzzed. Danny Crawford. "Jake, I found something in..." Sophia's cell phone pinged a tower near Belmont around 7:45 p.m. yesterday. That's about 15 miles east of Williams on I-40. But here's the thing, there hasn't been any activity on her phone since then. No calls, no texts, nothing. It's like it just went dark. "Dead battery," Jake texted back. "Maybe. Or turned off. Or destroyed." "Look, I'm heading out there now with a patrol unit. We're going to check the area around that cell tower. But Jake, it's a big area and it's dark. We might not find anything until morning." "We're already out here. Give me the exact location of that tower and we'll start searching too." Danny provided the coordinates and Jake plugged them into his phone's GPS. Belmont was back toward Williams, which meant if Sophia had been there at 7:45, she was almost home. So close. What had happened in those last 15 miles? They got back on the bikes and retraced their route to the highway, then headed west toward Belmont. It was a small, unincorporated community with a handful of houses scattered along the highway and even fewer businesses. The cell tower Danny mentioned was visible from the road, a tall structure with red warning lights blinking against the dark sky. Jake pulled off at the next exit and they began a systematic search of the area. There were dirt turnoffs, rest areas, and several spots where someone could pull over. But in the darkness, with only their headlights and flashlights, searching felt futile. Emma had gone quiet on the back of Jake's bike. When he stopped to check on her, he found she was crying silently, her face pressed against his back. The sight broke something in him. "Marcus," Jake called out, "we need to regroup. Think this through logically." They pulled into a closed gas station, the parking lot empty and eerie under a single streetlight. Jake helped Emma off the bike, and the three of them sat on the curb looking out at the dark highway. "If Sophia was here at 7:45, Marcus said, thinking aloud, "and her phone went dark, either something happened to her or she turned her phone off herself." "Why would she turn off her phone?" Emma asked. "She'd want to call me." It was a good question, and Jake didn't have a good answer. "Emma," he said carefully, "did your mama ever mention anyone following her? Anyone making her uncomfortable?" Emma thought for a moment, wiping her eyes. "There was this one time, maybe a month ago. She came home from work and double-checked all the locks. I asked her why, and she said she thought someone had followed her from the hospital, but then she said she was probably just being paranoid because it was dark." "Did she describe the car?" "No, she just said she was tired and seeing things." Emma's eyes widened. But what if she wasn't seeing things? What if someone really was following her? Marcus and Jake exchanged a look. If someone had been stalking Sophia, waiting for the right moment, the stretch of highway between Belmont and Williams was dark and isolated. Perfect for an ambush. "We need to think like predators," Marcus said quietly. "If someone wanted to grab Sophia, they'd do it in a place where there weren't any witnesses, somewhere they could stop her car without being seen." Jake stood up and pulled out his phone, studying the map. "There's a rest area about 5 miles from here. It's isolated. People don't use it much anymore because there's a newer one 10 miles west. If I were going to ambush someone, that's where I'd do it," Marcus finished. They mounted the bikes again, Emma's arms now trembling as she held onto Jake. The rest area was exactly as Jake remembered it from previous rides through the area, a cracked parking lot with a couple of picnic tables, a boarded-up restroom building, and an information kiosk that hadn't been updated since the 1990s. There were no lights except for one broken street lamp that flickered intermittently. As they pulled in, Jake's headlight swept across the parking lot, and there, partially hidden behind the restroom building, was a blue Honda Civic. "That's it!" Emma screamed. "That's Mama's car! I can see the bumper sticker!" Jake's heart hammered as he pulled up next to the Honda. Marcus was already off his bike, running toward the car. Emma scrambled off before Jake could help her, running to the driver's side door. "Mama, Mama." Emma yanked on the door handle, but it was locked. The windows were dark. Marcus shined his flashlight through the driver's side window. "There's no one inside." "But Emma, Marcus turned to the girl. "Is this definitely your mom's car?" "Yes, look, there's the scratch she was embarrassed about." Emma pointed to the driver's side panel where a long scratch marred the paint. "And that's her air freshener hanging from the mirror." "Where is she? Why is her car here, but she's not?" Jake walked around the vehicle, examining it carefully. There were no signs of a crash or collision. No broken glass. No blood. The car looked completely normal except for one thing. The driver's side door was locked, but when Jake tried the passenger side, it opened. "The passenger door is unlocked," Jake said. He leaned inside, looking for any clues. Sophia's purse was on the passenger seat along with her phone. Jake picked up the phone carefully. The screen was cracked, and when he tried to turn it on, nothing happened. The battery was dead, or the phone was broken. "Her purse is here," Jake called out. "Her phone, her wallet, everything." "So she didn't leave willingly," Marcus said grimly. "If you're going somewhere voluntarily, you take your purse." Emma had started crying again, harder this time. "Someone took her. Someone took my mama." Jake pulled out his phone and called Danny. "We found the car. Rest area 5 miles west of Belmont on I-40. Blue Honda Civic. Sophia's not here, but all her belongings are. This is officially a crime scene." "I'm 10 minutes out," Danny said. "Don't touch anything else. I'm calling this in as an abduction." As they waited for the police, Jake walked the perimeter of the rest area with his flashlight. Marcus stayed with Emma, who was sitting on the curb, clutching her mother's purse to her chest like a lifeline. Behind the rest area, Jake found something. Tire tracks in the dirt, deep ones like a large vehicle had been parked there recently. And next to the tracks, something small and blue. Jake bent down and picked it up carefully with a tissue from his pocket. It was a button, light blue fabric, the kind used on medical scrubs. Jake's jaw clenched. Sophia had been wearing blue scrubs when she left for work. This button had been ripped off in a struggle. He walked back to Marcus and showed him the button without letting Emma see. A shadow crossed Marcus's face. They both knew what this meant. Sophia hadn't left voluntarily. She'd been taken forcibly from this deserted rest area. And whoever had taken her had done so in a large vehicle, probably a truck or van, based on the tire tracks. Within minutes, the night exploded with sirens and lights. 2 sheriff's vehicles pulled into the rest area, followed by Danny Crawford in an unmarked car. Danny was a stocky man in his 40s with a weathered face and sharp eyes that had seen too much. He took one look at the scene and immediately began barking orders into his radio. "I need crime scene techs out here, ASAP, and get me every traffic camera between here and Flagstaff. We're looking for any large vehicles, trucks, vans that were in this area between 7:30 and 8 o'clock p.m. yesterday." He turned to Jake. "Show me what you found." Jake led him to the tire tracks and the button. Danny photographed everything with his phone, then looked back at Emma, who was now sitting in the back of one of the patrol cars with a blanket around her shoulders, being questioned gently by a female deputy. "This is bad, Jake," Danny said quietly. "If Sophia was grabbed here, we're looking at a possible trafficking situation. Or worse." "Don't say that where Emma can hear you," Jake warned. "I won't. But you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that we might not find Sophia alive. It's been almost 24 hours. "We're going to find her," Jake said firmly. "That little girl gave us her last $10 to help. We're not giving up." Danny studied Jake for a moment. "You've changed, man. The Jake I knew in the service wouldn't have gotten involved in something like this." "Maybe that Jake needed to learn how to care about something besides himself," Jake replied. Over the next hour, the rest area became a hive of activity. Crime scene technicians arrived and began processing Sophia's car. They found fingerprints on the passenger door handle, not Sophia's, and vacuumed the interior for trace evidence. The tire tracks were photographed and measured. Every inch of the rest area was searched. Emma sat with Jake and Marcus wrapped in a blanket, watching everything with wide, terrified eyes. A victim advocate had arrived and was trying to explain what would happen next. Emma would need to go to a foster home or shelter until Sophia was found or a family member could be located. No, Emma said firmly. I'm staying with them. She pointed at Jake and Marcus. The advocate, a kind-faced woman named Sandra, shook her head. Sweetie, these men are strangers. You can't just... They promised to find my mama, and they're the only ones who believed me when I said something was wrong. Emma grabbed Jake's hand. Please don't make me go with strangers. Sandra looked at Danny, who looked at Jake. Can we talk privately? Danny asked. They stepped away from Emma, and Danny lowered his voice. Look, I know you mean well, but you can't just take custody of someone's kid. There are procedures. Those procedures would have told Emma to wait 24 hours while her mother was being God knows what, Jake interrupted. We've got a head start on this investigation because we didn't wait. Emma trusts us. Let us take care of her until you find Sophia or locate the sister in Phoenix. If anything happens to that girl while she's in your care, nothing will happen to her, Marcus cut in. You know us, Danny. You know we'd die before letting something happen to a kid. Danny looked between them, then sighed. 24 hours. That's all I can give you without going through official channels. Emma stays with you, but you keep me updated on your location at all times. And if Child Services gets wind of this, I don't know anything about it. Clear, Pyram. Crystal, Jake said. They returned to Emma, who looked at them hopefully. You can stay with us, Jake said, but we need to find somewhere safe for you to sleep tonight. I want to help find Mama, Emma insisted. The best way you can help right now is by staying safe and rested, Marcus said gently. The police are doing everything they can. They've got helicopters, search teams, and they're checking every camera between here and Flagstaff. But Jake could see the frustration in Emma's eyes, the helpless feeling of being on the sidelines while someone you love is in danger. He knew that feeling intimately. Danny pulled Jake aside one more time. The button you found, preliminary analysis, shows possible blood trace. We're running DNA, but that'll take time. And Jake, we found something else. In the dirt behind the rest area, there's a partial boot print. Large, probably a man's size, 11 or 12, and something that looks like it might be from a struggle. Disturbed earth, like someone was dragged. Jake's blood ran cold. So we're definitely looking at an abduction. Without a doubt, and judging by the professionalism grabbing her in an isolated location, disabling her phone, leaving no witnesses, we might be dealing with someone experienced. This wasn't opportunistic. This was planned. Which means whoever took her might have been watching her for a while. Exactly. Danny handed Jake a card. This is the FBI field office in Flagstaff. I'm bringing them in on this first thing tomorrow morning. Interstate abduction is their jurisdiction anyway. But Jake, I need you to be realistic about this. Most abduction victims, if they're not found in the first few hours. I know the statistics, Jake said shortly. But statistics don't matter to that little girl. Her mother is out there somewhere, and we're going to bring her home. As the investigation continued around them, Jake and Marcus made a decision. They'd take Emma to a motel in Williams, somewhere she could rest and feel safe. But they wouldn't stop searching. While Emma slept, they'd ride these roads, talk to people, follow every lead. Because somewhere in the vast Arizona night, Sophia Bennett was fighting to survive. And they'd promised her daughter they'd find her. That promise was all that mattered now. The Desert Rose Motel in Williams was one of those old Route 66 establishments that had seen better days but still maintained a certain weary dignity. Pink stucco walls, turquoise doors, and a vintage neon sign that buzzed and flickered in the night. Jake paid cash for 2 adjoining rooms while Emma waited with Marcus by the bikes. It was nearly 1 in the morning when they finally got Emma settled. The room was clean but dated floral bedspreads, wood paneling, and a window air conditioner that rattled and hummed. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, still clutching her mother's purse, her eyes red and swollen from crying. You need to try to sleep, Marcus said, gently pulling off his boots. He'd volunteered to stay in the room with Emma while Jake took the adjoining room. Neither of them felt comfortable leaving her alone. I can't sleep, Emma whispered. Every time I close my eyes, I see Mama scared and calling for me, and I'm not there. Marcus sat down beside him. His own daughter, Keisha, was 20 now, living with her grandmother in Texas. He saw her maybe twice a year. He'd missed so much of her childhood, lost in his own demons, after coming home from Afghanistan. Looking at Emma now, he saw all the moments he'd lost, all the times his daughter had needed him, and he hadn't been there. He remembered the last birthday party he'd attended before the divorce. Keisha turning 8, surrounded by friends, and when it was time to blow out the candles, she'd looked at him with those big eyes and said, "Make a wish with me, Daddy." He'd tried, but all he could think about was the roadside bomb that had killed 3 of his friends, and suddenly he was sweating, hyperventilating, and his ex-wife was ushering him out of the room while Keisha watched confused and scared. A week later, the divorce papers arrived. "Your mama is strong," Marcus said. "That's what I learned today, just from seeing your house talking to people who know her. She came to this country, raised you by herself, became a nurse. That takes incredible strength. And right now, wherever she is, she's fighting to come back to you. She's not given up, and we're not giving up either." "Promise?" Emma's voice was so small, so vulnerable. "Promise," Marcus said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. In the adjoining room, Jake sat on his bed with his phone going through everything they knew. Danny had sent him photos of the crime scene, including close-ups of the tire tracks. Jake enlarged the images, studying the tread pattern. He'd spent enough time around vehicles to recognize quality tires when he saw them. These weren't cheap, and the spacing suggested a full-size truck or cargo van. His phone rang. Maria Bennett, Sophia's sister, finally calling back. "Mr. Webb left me a message about my sister." Maria said, her voice tight with panic. "What's happened?" "Where's Sophia?" Jake explained everything as calmly as he could. Sophia's disappearance, the abandoned car, the evidence of an abduction. Maria's sobs echoed through the phone. "I knew something like this would happen," Maria choked out. "I told her to be more careful. I told her." "What do you mean?" Jake interrupted. "Do you know why someone would want to hurt Sophia?" Maria hesitated. "Did she ever tell you about Rosa?" "No." "Who's Rosa?" "Rosa Palmer. She and Sophia worked together at the hospital in Flagstaff. They were friends." Maria took a shaky breath. "About 2 months ago, Rosa disappeared. Just vanished after her shift one night. The police said she probably just left town, but Sophia didn't believe it. Rosa had a son. She'd never leave him." Jake's pulse quickened. "What happened to Rosa? Was she ever found?" "No, it's like she dropped off the face of the earth." Maria's voice broke. Sophia was terrified after that. She thought maybe Rosa had seen something at the hospital, something she wasn't supposed to see. Sophia started talking about how some of the doctors were acting strange, how there was money missing, how patient medication records weren't adding up. "Did she report this to anyone?" "She was going to. She told me 3 weeks ago that she'd gathered evidence and was planning to take it to the hospital administration. But then she got scared. She said someone left a note on her car, just one word, 'Careful.'" Maria's voice broke. After that, she stopped talking about it, said she was going to keep her head down and focus on Emma. "I should have come to get her. I should have brought her and Emma here to Phoenix where they'd be safe." Jake's mind raced. If Sophia had stumbled onto something illegal at the hospital, theft, medication diversion, insurance fraud, and someone wanted to silence her, that changed everything. This wasn't a random abduction. Sophia had been targeted. "Maria, I need you to do something. Tomorrow morning, first thing, I need you to drive to Williams. Emma needs family, and she needs to know you care. Can you do that?" "I'm leaving right now," Maria said immediately. "It's only a 3-hour drive. I'll be there before dawn." After hanging up, Jake called Danny and relayed everything Maria had told him. Danny was silent for a long moment. If Sophia was taken because she knew too much about illegal activity at the hospital, we're looking at a completely different kind of case. "I need to get hospital records, interview staff, pull financials. But Jake, that's going to take time. And if Sophia's being held somewhere, then we don't have time," Jake finished. "Danny, there has to be something we're missing. Some clue that tells us where to look. I'll have the FBI run through everything again at first light. In the meantime, try to get some rest. You've been at this for almost 18 hours straight." But Jake knew he wouldn't sleep. He stood up and walked through the adjoining door to check on Emma and Marcus. Marcus was sprawled in a chair by the window, dozing lightly, a soldier's sleep, where he was still half aware of his surroundings. Emma was curled up on the bed, finally asleep, but even in sleep, her face was troubled. Jake stepped back into his own room and pulled out his laptop. If the hospital was involved, there would be records. He started searching for any news articles about Flagstaff Medical Center, any complaints, any lawsuits, anything that might give him a lead. What he found was a pattern. Over the past year, there had been 3 nurses who'd left the hospital suddenly. Rosa Palmer was one. The other 2 had supposedly moved out of state for family reasons. But Jake's instincts, honed by years of service and hard living, told him something was very wrong. He dug deeper, finding social media profiles. One of the nurses, Bethany Morrison, had a Facebook page that had gone silent 6 months ago. Her last post was a photo of her daughter's birthday party. After that, nothing. The other nurse, Amanda Foster, had a similar pattern. Active social media presence, then sudden silence. Jake called Danny again. I think we're looking at multiple victims. Sophia isn't the first nurse to disappear from that hospital. There are at least 3 others in the past year. Jesus, Danny breathed. Jake, if you're right, we might be dealing with a serial offender. Someone with access to the hospital. Someone who can identify vulnerable targets, single mothers, women who work alone at night. Can you wake up a judge, get a warrant for the hospital's personnel records, security footage, everything? At 2 a.m. I can try, but Danny, every hour counts. If this is serial and this person has Sophia somewhere, she might still be alive. Serial offenders often keep their victims for days before. Jake couldn't finish the sentence. I'll make the calls, Danny said, and Jake, you might have just broken this case wide open. After hanging up, Jake sat back, his mind churning. If someone at the hospital was targeting nurses, they'd need a place to keep their victims, somewhere isolated where screams wouldn't be heard, somewhere they could come and go without attracting attention. He pulled up a map of the area around Flagstaff, looking for abandoned buildings, old warehouses, remote properties. There were dozens of possibilities. Old mining structures, defunct ranches, foreclosed properties. Finding the right location was like looking for a needle in a haystack. A soft knock on the adjoining door. Marcus stepped through, closing the door quietly behind him. Emma's asleep. I heard you on the phone. What have you got? Jake filled him in on everything. Rosa Palmer, the other missing nurses, the pattern of disappearances. Marcus's jaw tightened with each detail. So we're not just looking for Sophia, Marcus said. We might be looking for multiple women. If they're still alive, Jake said grimly, we have to believe they are. Because if Sophia's already dead, Marcus stopped shaking his head. We can't think like that. We have to believe we can still save her. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from Danny. Got the warrant. Meeting FBI at hospital at 6 a.m. Stay with Emma. But Jake wasn't content to sit and wait. He stood up and grabbed his keys. I'm going back out there, back to that rest area. Maybe I missed something. It's the middle of the night, Marcus pointed out. I don't care. I can't sit here while Sophia's out there suffering. Jake grabbed his leather vest. You stay with Emma. If Maria gets here before I'm back, call me. Jake, Marcus grabbed his arm. You can't save everyone. You couldn't save your marriage, couldn't save your relationship with your daughter. Those things weren't your fault, but you've been carrying that guilt for years. Don't let this become another weight you can't bear. This is different, Jake said quietly. That little girl in there gave us her last $10. She trusted us when she had no reason to. I'm not failing her. Marcus studied his friend's face and saw something he hadn't seen in years. Purpose. Real burning purpose. All right, but you're not going alone. Emma will be fine for a couple hours. We'll leave a note in case she wakes up. They wrote a quick note explaining where they'd left it on the nightstand and quietly left the motel. The night air was cold now, the temperature having dropped into the low 50s. Their breath misted as they mounted their bikes and started the engines. The ride back to the rest area took 20 minutes. When they arrived, the crime scene tape was still up, fluttering in the wind. Jake parked his bike and pulled out a high-powered flashlight he kept in his saddlebag. What are we looking for? Marcus asked. Anything that tells us where Sophia was taken. The direction, the vehicle type, anything. Jake walked to where they'd found the tire tracks. In the darkness, something caught his eye, a small piece of metal glinting in the dirt. He bent down and picked it up carefully. It was a metal tag, the kind used on keychains. Engraved on it were the words Prescott Fleet Services and a phone number. Prescott, Jake said. That's south of here, maybe 90 miles. Fleet Services, Marcus said, like a vehicle maintenance company. Exactly. Jake photographed the tag with his phone and immediately called Danny. I found something, a keychain tag from a fleet services company in Prescott. If our abductor works for a company with a fleet of vehicles, that narrows it down significantly. Good work, Danny said. I'll have someone contact Prescott Fleet Services first thing in the morning. Get a list of clients. Don't wait for morning, Jake urged. Call them now. Wake someone up if you have to. As they continued searching the area, Jake's phone rang. It was an unknown number. He answered cautiously. Hello. Is this Jake Mitchell? A woman's voice. Scared. Weak. Yes. Who is this? My name is Rosa Palmer. I don't have much time. He'll check on us soon. But if you're looking for Sophia Bennett, I know where she is. We're both here. And there are others. Jake's heart nearly stopped. Rosa, where are you? Tell me where you are. An old mining camp north of Prescott, the Copper King Mine. It's abandoned. He keeps us in the old processing building. Her voice cracked. Please hurry. Sophia's hurt bad. She tried to fight him when he brought her in, and please just hurry. The line went dead. Jake looked at Marcus, his hands shaking. I know where they are. The Copper King Mine was marked on Jake's GPS as a historical site abandonment since the 1970s. It was 40 miles north of Prescott, deep in the mountains, accessible only by dirt roads that wound through national forest land. As Jake and Marcus raced south on I-40, then turned onto smaller highways, the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Jake had called Danny immediately after Rosa's call, and the FBI was mobilizing a tactical team. But they were coming from Flagstaff at least 90 minutes out, maybe more. Jake and Marcus were closer. Maybe 40 minutes if they pushed their bikes hard. 40 minutes, that might mean the difference between life and death. They rode hard, their engines roaring through the early morning stillness. The highways gave way to county roads, then to dirt tracks barely wide enough for a single vehicle. The terrain was rugged pine forests interspersed with rocky outcroppings and steep ravines. Perfect place to hide something you didn't want found. As they climbed into the mountains, Jake's phone buzzed. A text from Maria. At the motel. Emma's awake. Terrified but safe. Find my sister. Another text from Danny Prescott. Fleet Services has one client in the medical field, HealthLink Medical Supply. They contract with Flagstaff Medical Center. Checking employee records now. Pieces clicking into place. Someone at HealthLink had access to the hospital, could identify vulnerable targets, could move around in a company vehicle without arousing suspicion. The GPS indicated they were close. Jake slowed his bike, scanning the tree line. Marcus pulled up beside him, and they killed their engines, listening. In the distance, they could hear the sound of running water, a stream or creek, and something else. The faint sound of a generator running. They dismounted and proceeded on foot, moving quietly through the trees. Years of military training kicked in, spacing themselves apart, using hand signals, staying low. The old mine came into view. A cluster of dilapidated buildings, rusted equipment, and a massive slag heap covered in vegetation. One building had a light on inside, and parked next to it was a white cargo van with HealthLink Medical Supply printed on the side. Jake's blood ran cold. They'd found it. But they were outnumbered, outgunned, and backup was still at least 30 minutes out. Marcus caught his eye and made a series of hand signals. You go left, I'll go right. Observe first. No contact until backup arrives, unless lives are in immediate danger. But then they heard it, a scream. Female, terrified, cut off abruptly. All plans for caution evaporated. Jake and Marcus ran toward the building, no longer caring about stealth. Jake reached the door first. It was padlocked but old and rusted. Marcus kicked it once, twice. On the third kick, the lock gave way. They burst inside and immediately stopped taking in the scene. The old processing building had been converted into a makeshift prison. Metal cages lined one wall like animal kennels. 4 of them contained women, emaciated, terrified, wearing dirty hospital scrubs. Sophia was in the cage closest to the door. Her face was bruised and swollen, blood crusting from a cut above her eye. And standing in the center of the room holding a cattle prod was a man in his 30s. Average height, average build, completely unremarkable except for the cold calculation in his eyes. His HealthLink uniform was clean and pressed. "Well," he said calmly, "this is unexpected." Jake barely registered the man's words. His eyes were locked on Sophia. "Emma's safe," he said. "Your daughter is safe." Sophia's eyes dull and hopeless a moment before suddenly flooded with tears. "Emma," she whispered, "my baby." "Step away from the cages," Marcus ordered, his voice hard and dangerous. The man Jake would later learn his name was Carl Brenner, a delivery driver for HealthLink, smiled. "I don't think so. See, you're on private property, interfering with my business. I could call the cops right now. Have you arrested for trespassing?" "Your business." Jake's voice was deadly quiet. "Kidnapping and imprisoning women is your business. Someone has to supply the labor," Carl said as if it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "These women, nobody misses them. Single mothers, women who work alone. When they disappear, the system shrugs and moves on. They're invisible." "They're human beings," Marcus snarled. Carl's expression didn't change. "They're inventory. I have buyers for them. People who need workers, who won't complain, won't run to authorities, who can be controlled. It's supply and demand, really." Jake felt sick. This wasn't just about silencing witnesses. Carl was trafficking these women, selling them into forced labor or worse. "It's over," Jake said. "FBI is on their way. You're done." Carl's smile widened. "FBI? That's at least 20 minutes out, probably more. And I have a remote trigger in my pocket. One press and this entire building is wired to explode. I built it as insurance. If I can't control my inventory, nobody can have them." Sophia made a small, desperate sound. The other women in the cages began to cry. Jake's mind raced. Carl was standing about 15 feet away, his hand in his pocket. Too far to rush without giving him time to trigger the bomb. But if they backed down, let him go, these women would die anyway. And Carl would disappear, set up shop somewhere else. "How about a deal?" Jake said, forcing his voice to stay calm. "You walk out of here right now. Get in your van and drive away. We won't stop you. You get a head start before the FBI arrives." Marcus looked at Jake sharply, but Jake kept his eyes on Carl. Carl considered this. "Why would you let me go?" "Because these women's lives matter more than revenge. I don't care about catching you. I care about getting them out safely." Jake took a half step back, hands raised. "You've already lost your business here. Cut your losses. Run." For a moment, Carl seemed to buy it. His hand started to come out of his pocket. And in that split second, Marcus moved. Years of military training, combat experience, and pure protective instinct compressed into a single moment. Marcus covered the 15 feet in less than 2 seconds, hitting Carl with a tackle that would have made a linebacker proud. They went down hard, Carl's head cracking against the concrete floor. Jake was there instantly, pinning Carl's arms. Marcus yanked Carl's hand from his pocket. It was empty. There was no remote trigger. It had been a bluff. "You're going to wish there was a bow," Marcus growled, pulling off his belt to use as makeshift restraints. Jake ran to Sophia's cage. The padlock was newer, stronger than the one on the door. "Where are the keys?" he shouted at Carl. Carl, dazed and bleeding from the back of his head, just laughed. Jake looked around frantically and spotted a toolbox in the corner. He grabbed a bolt cutter and attacked the padlock. It took 3 tries, his arms shaking with effort, but finally the lock snapped. Sophia nearly fell out of the cage. Jake caught her, supporting her weight. "Easy, easy. We've got you." "Emma," Sophia sobbed. "I need to see Emma." "You will, I promise." Jake helped her to a sitting position, then went to work on the other cages. Marcus had Carl secured and was already on his phone with 911 giving their location. One by one, the women emerged from the cages. Rosa Palmer, who'd somehow managed to get to a phone and called Jake. Bethany Morrison. Amanda Foster. 4 women who'd been written off as runaways or willing deserters when in reality they'd been prisoners suffering in silence in this forgotten mining camp. "How did you get to a phone?" Jake asked Rosa as he helped her out of her cage. Rosa's hands shook as she pointed to a corner of the building. "He kept his phone on the charger over there. When he left last night to get Sophia, I managed to reach through the bars and grab it. I had maybe 2 minutes before he came back. I saw your number on the screen. You'd called about Sophia earlier, and the missed call was still showing. I tried 911 first, but the signal was so weak it wouldn't go through. Your number worked. You saved everyone's lives." Marcus said, covering her with his jacket. That was incredibly brave. Within 15 minutes, the clearing filled with vehicles, FBI tactical team, local police, ambulances, and Danny Crawford, who took one look at the scene and grabbed Jake in a bear hug. "You crazy son of a bitch," Danny said. "You and Marcus just took down a trafficking operation." But Jake wasn't paying attention to the commendations or the chaos. He was watching paramedics load Sophia into an ambulance. She was weak, dehydrated, injured, but alive. She'd fought Carl when he'd first brought her in, earning the injuries to her face, but she'd survived. "I need to take her to her daughter," Jake said to the lead paramedic. "Emma's at the Desert Rose Motel in Williams." "She needs to go to a hospital first," the paramedic said. "She's got broken ribs, possible concussion, severe dehydration." "Then Williams Medical Center," Sophia insisted, her voice hoarse but determined. "I need to see my daughter. Please, she must be terrified." The paramedic looked at his partner, then nodded. "Williams Medical Center it is, but you're riding in the ambulance and we're monitoring you the whole way." "Can they come?" Sophia pointed at Jake and Marcus. "I want to thank them properly. I want Emma to see that they kept their promise." Jake and Marcus followed the ambulance back to Williams. The FBI had driven them both up to the mine site. The ride took over an hour, but Jake spent most of it on the phone with Maria preparing Emma for the reunion. When they finally pulled up to Williams Medical Center, Emma was waiting outside with Maria. The moment the ambulance doors opened and Sophia was wheeled out on a stretcher, Emma broke free from her aunt's grasp and ran. "Mama! Mama!" Emma's scream was pure joy and relief. Sophia's arms opened and Emma launched herself at her mother, nearly knocking over the gurney. The paramedics tried to intervene, worried about Sophia's injuries, but Sophia held her daughter tight, tears streaming down both their faces. Mi amor, Sophia whispered, kissing Emma's hair over and over. I'm here. I knew you'd come back," Emma sobbed. "I knew you wouldn't leave me. And Jake and Marcus, they promised they'd find you, and they did, Mama. They kept their promise." Sophia looked over Emma's head at Jake and Marcus, who stood a respectful distance away. The gratitude in her eyes was beyond words. Inside the hospital, while doctors examined Sophia, Jake and Marcus sat in the waiting room with Emma and Maria. Emma had finally stopped crying, though she refused to let go of Jake's hand. "You gave us $10, Jake said gently. "That was all you had, and you gave it to two strangers." "You weren't strangers," Emma said simply. "I could tell. Mama always says you can see people's hearts if you look close enough. You both looked scary on the outside, but your hearts were good. I could tell." Marcus cleared his throat, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Emma, that $10, we never spent it. I think you should have it back." He pulled the crumpled bill from his vest pocket. But Emma shook her head. "No, that was payment for finding my mama. You earned it." "We didn't do this for money, sweetheart," Jake said. "I know, but Mama always says honest work deserves honest pay." Emma smiled, the first real smile Jake had seen from her. "Besides, you probably need it for gas. Those motorcycles must use a lot." Maria laughed through her tears. She's her mother's daughter, stubborn and practical. Over the next 2 hours, as doctors treated Sophia and police took statements, the full story emerged. Carl Brenner had been trafficking nurses for almost 2 years. He'd select women who fit a profile: single mothers, women with limited support networks, and study their routines. He'd tamper with their cars or create situations forcing them to stop at predetermined locations, then abduct them in his company van. He'd kept his victims at the old mine, using them for forced labor in an underground medical supply theft ring. Hospitals across 3 states had reported missing medication supplies and equipment, all of it ending up on the black market, sold by Carl and his network. The women were forced to help sort, package, and inventory the stolen goods. Rosa Palmer had been his first victim from Flagstaff Medical Center. When Sophia started asking questions about Rosa's disappearance, Carl added her to his list. He'd followed Sophia for weeks, learning her schedule, waiting for the perfect opportunity. But he hadn't counted on Emma's courage, or on 2 bikers who refused to let a little girl's plea for help go unanswered. By late afternoon, Sophia was released from the hospital with strict instructions to rest and return for follow-up. Maria had already arranged for Sophia and Emma to stay with her in Phoenix while Sophia recovered. The hospital had granted Sophia medical leave, and the FBI had assured her that her testimony would be crucial in dismantling the entire trafficking network. As they prepared to leave, Sophia asked to speak with Jake and Marcus privately. They stepped outside into the golden afternoon light, the same sun that had been setting when Emma first approached them at Rosie's diner. Was that really just yesterday? I don't have the words, Sophia said, her voice breaking. You saved my life. You saved 4 lives. And you did it because my daughter had faith in you. Emma saved you, Jake said. She's the bravest person I've ever met. She didn't give up even when everyone else told her to wait to be patient. She trusted her instincts and she fought for you. Sophia smiled through tears. She is brave. Braver than me sometimes. She reached into her purse, the same purse Emma had clutched at the diner, and pulled out a small velvet pouch. This was my grandmother's. She gave it to me when I was Emma's age. Told me it would protect me. She opened the pouch, revealing a simple silver cross on a chain. It didn't protect me from being taken, but it brought you to my daughter, so maybe it did protect me after all. She handed the cross to Jake. I want you to have this. Both of you. Share it or give it to someone else who needs protecting. But please take it, with my gratitude. Jake accepted the cross with shaking hands. Sophia, we can't. You can, you will, because that's what good men do. They accept gifts graciously. Sophia hugged them both fierce despite her injuries. If you're ever in Phoenix, you come find us. Emma will want to see her heroes. We're not heroes, Marcus said quietly. Yes, you are, Emma said, joining them on the hospital steps. She'd been listening from the doorway. Heroes are people who help when no one else will, who see someone in trouble and do something about it. That's you. Emma pulled something from her pocket, the crumpled $10 bill. I changed my mind. I want you to keep this, not as payment, as a reminder that sometimes when you ask for help, people answer. And sometimes scary-looking bikers with tattoos and loud motorcycles turn out to be the best people in the whole world. She pressed the bill into Jake's hand, then hugged him tight. Thank you for bringing my mama home. As Jake and Marcus rode out of Williams an hour later, the sun was setting again, painting the sky in those same shades of orange and purple. But everything else had changed. Jake kept the $10 bill in his vest pocket right next to Sophia's grandmother's cross. They'd ridden these roads for years looking for something. Freedom, peace, purpose, redemption. And in the span of 48 hours, a little girl with immense courage had given them all of it. Where to now? Marcus asked as they paused at a stop sign. Jake looked at the road stretching ahead of them. Route 66, the Mother Road, thousands of miles of highway and history and possibility. He thought about his own daughter in California, the one he'd failed so many times. Maybe it was time to stop running and start showing up. California, Jake said. I need to see my kid. Need to try to be the father she deserves even if I'm years late. Marcus grinned. Took you long enough to figure that out. Had a good teacher. Jake smiled, thinking of Emma's fierce determination, Sophia's unbreakable love for her daughter, and the reminder that family, biological or chosen, was worth fighting for. They started their engines, the familiar rumble filling the evening air. But this time, they weren't riding away from something. They were riding toward it. Behind them in a small house in Phoenix, Emma Bennett would sleep peacefully that night, her mother beside her. The nightmare was over. The healing could begin. And somewhere on Route 66, 2 bikers who'd been seen as scary outsiders, who'd been judged and dismissed based on their appearance, rode into the sunset knowing they'd made a difference. That they'd been exactly who they needed to be, exactly when it mattered most. All because a little girl had looked past the leather and tattoos and seen their hearts. Sometimes Jake thought the smallest voices carry the most important messages. And sometimes $10 is worth more than all the gold in the world. 3 months later, Jake stood on a beach in Santa Monica, watching the sunset paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of fire and gold. Beside him, Sarah, his daughter, laughed at something her boyfriend had said. It was the 4th time they'd met since that night in Arizona. The first 3 had been awkward, stilted conversations over coffee, where they'd circled around years of hurt and abandonment. But this time was different. This time, Sarah had invited him to meet her boyfriend, to be part of her life again, even if just a small part. Dad, Sarah said, and the words still made Jake's chest tight, tell Derek about the little girl, the one who hired you with $10. Jake smiled and pulled out his wallet. Inside, carefully preserved behind plastic, was that crumpled $10 bill. Her name was Emma, Jake began, and she taught me that it's never too late to be the person you were supposed to be. As he told the story, Emma's courage, Sophia's strength, the desperate search, and the final rescue, Sarah listened with tears in her eyes. "You saved them," she whispered when he finished. "No," Jake said. "They saved me." Later that night, after saying goodbye to Sarah with a hug that lasted longer than any before, Jake called Marcus. "How did it go?" Marcus asked. "Good, really good. We're having dinner next week. She wants me to meet her mom. Not to reconcile, just to show that we can all move forward." "That's huge, brother. How about you? You talked to Keisha?" "Yeah, she's coming to visit next month, bringing her girlfriend. Wants me to meet her." Marcus paused. "I'm terrified." "You'll be great. Just be yourself." "That's what I'm afraid of." "Marcus, you tackled a kidnapper to save 4 women you didn't even know. You can handle meeting your daughter's girlfriend." Marcus laughed. "When you put it that way." They talked it for a while longer, making plans to ride together next month. But it wouldn't be an aimless ride. They'd be visiting Emma and Sophia in Phoenix. Emma had been writing letters, actual handwritten letters to both of them, filling them in on school, her new bike bright purple, and her mother's recovery. Sophia had started a support group for trafficking survivors. Rosa Bethany and Amanda were all part of it. They were healing together, finding strength in shared experience. And Carl Brenner. He'd pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty, life in prison without parole. But his arrest had led to a wider investigation that shut down trafficking networks across 5 states. Hundreds of women had been freed, all because Emma Bennett refused to give up on her mother. As Jake walked back to his motel that night, the $10 bill still in his wallet and the silver cross around his neck, he thought about the twisting roads that had led him here, the failures and the pain, the years of running from himself. He thought about a little girl with dark hair and determined eyes who'd seen past his scars and tattoos to the man he could be. And he thought about promises kept. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Dear Jake, Mama says I can visit you and Uncle Marcus this summer if it's okay. Can we ride motorcycles? Love, Emma. P.S. Mama says to tell you she's proud of you for seeing Sarah. She says Emma would be proud too. I think she means me, but I'm not sure. Love you." Jake smiled through the tears that blurred his vision. He typed back, "Of course you can visit. And yes, we'll ride motorcycles. I'm proud of you too, sweetheart. You saved all of us. Love, Jake." Sometimes the roads we travel take us exactly where we need to be. Sometimes $10 is the most valuable currency in the world. And sometimes the broken pieces of our lives can be put back together, not perfectly, but beautifully, by the trust of a child who saw past our armor to our hearts. Jake looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there on the open road, the engine of his Harley was waiting. The wind was waiting. The next chapter was waiting. But for the first time in 15 years, Jake Mitchell wasn't running toward it or away from anything. He was exactly where he needed to be. Home.